Thank you so much for making the time to be here. And this be me, Masha Tomori, James and Michael are from the Impact Farm Capstone final project, um, mentored by Ahu. And let me start off by, can I have the next slide, please? Thank you. As population growth, swelling food demands, and rising rate of urban poverty threaten food availability, addressing food insecurity, which can be defined as the inability to consistently access quality food, has become increasingly important. For the first time in the history of civilization, most people now live in cities, which almost entirely depend on imported food to meet daily needs. We're Is somebody saying something to me?
Yes, if you are not presenting, please do mute yourself.
Thank you.
Sorry about that. Go ahead.
For the first time in the history of civilization, most people now live in cities, which almost entirely depend on important food to meet daily needs. World population is projected to grow to 9.6 billion people within the next 35 years, and global food demand is projected to increase between 70 and 100%, depending on the future income per capita. Current available cropland and production levels will be unable to keep pace. Meeting future demand would require clearing an additional landmass the size of Brazil for farming, or more extensive use of chemical fertilizers, both of which are unsustainable. As the current unprecedented trend of rural to urban migration continues, global urbanites are expected to reach 70% of the world population by 2050. Research also indicates that the poor have been urbanized even more rapidly than the population as a whole, which means a higher trend of this migration from rural to urban. And over 60% of their income is spent on food. Take it away, James.
So as a response to these trends, our project focuses on creating a sustainable community farming hub for urban environments. And really, we are recreating this concept through a holistic optimization of an existing project called the Impact Farm. So our goals are to improve the design choices for greater efficiency and sustainability, expand the production capacity in terms of quantity and diversity, and create an educational platform to further engage the community. Before jumping into our project, I think it's important to give a little background on the existing concept. So there are currently 2 impact farms in use, but the case study we focused on was here in New York City. It's a 2-story educational hydroponic greenhouse designed by a company called Human Habitat, and the one here is operated by a local nonprofit called Harlem Grown. Some more general facts about the structure. It's a 21-foot cube that's prefabricated to fit inside a shipping container, and then to be built out around that shipping container in about a month. It's assembled with nuts and bolts, so it's designed for disassembly and could be packed back into the shipping container and shipped somewhere else. It's also off-grid, meaning the electricity used is generated and stored on site, and the water used for the hydroponic system is harvested from the roof.
Our precedent study was done to source the past and present influences which help in the further development of our project. We analyzed around 19 farms and created a matrix where we looked at the farm location, the farming method, crop type, the sizes, output, and sustainable features. Also, we focus also on its educational components. You guys may be familiar with a few of the farms shown on this slide. The Bowery Farm, which was one of the largest studied, actually did provide food for New Yorkers in the days following Hurricane Sandy. Eagle Street Rooftop Farm is also located in Brooklyn, and it does provide indoor, outdoor growing spaces, and it does supply local groceries. There's also the Cricket Lab that you see here. It's located in Thailand. I have not tried crickets, but I heard it's quite nutritional. Some of the farms seen here range from a small room all the way to 115 acres. Can I get the next slide? The next slide is an expanded table of the farm studied. You can see our impact farms, the first one, and we sort of compared it to other precedent farms that we looked at. Some of the farming methods on this slide, they include hydroponic, aquaponics, block modules. You see the sizes in some of the columns and whether there's an educational component or not. That means if they do provide walk-in tours or does provide virtual tours as it may. Can I get the next slide? This slide shows the same information. Just take a minute. Look at some of the comparisons. And now Marcia is going to continue the presentation.
Thanks, Michael. The bubble chart you see on the screen provides a more extensive look at our project priorities and how they came to be. Impact Farms Capstone was tackled on three different wings: its design, its production, and the education offered, divided among the three members of the team. You can observe lines connecting different segments among the wings, representing how these affect each other. For example, simulations and design by increasing the interactivity of the farm can make it more inspiring, right? Can I have the next slide, please? For our research and method, case studies and surveys were conducted and designs and simulations were observed for this research. And next slide, James.
So the first of the three sections is production. The production capacity of the current system is about 1,000 pounds per year of leafy greens and herbs. The chart at the top of the slide shows the monthly production, which you can see dips dramatically in the winter. The chart at the bottom shows the current growing systems, their requirements, as well as their inputs and outputs. The overall yield per square foot is much lower than many of the urban farm precedents we analyzed. So our overall goal in this section was to increase the quantity and variety of food in the impact farm. In our optimized version, 6 additional growing processes were added, each contributing a unique crop type. The electrical demand and square footage were kept relatively constant, while the estimated yield was more than tripled. Additionally, the climatic and spatial requirements for each system were used to inform where they would be located in the farm and how they would interact with each other. So in the current production floor plan, which you see on this slide, the first floor is kept relatively open as a multi-use space, while the top floor is completely devoted to vertical hydroponic production. In our optimized floor plan, several interactive growing systems were added to the first floor to better utilize that space. Additionally, the shipping container was buried underneath the first floor to create a basement that is utilized to grow mushrooms. On the second floor, 2 different hydroponic systems were used to make the space more diverse and flexible.
I will now cover the second parameter looked at, which is the design of the farm, its challenges, and some of the solutions that we looked at. The farm does maintain its indoor environment via the use of a pellet stove, louvers, fans, large sliding doors specifically used in the winter to increase ventilation and decrease temperatures and humidities. Even though the farm is primarily operated off the grid, the farm does have access to tap into city power if necessary. Again, the main issue pointed out by James and discovered through looking at the farm as is that it does not reach its set temperature during the winter months. The slide on the right, you can see the images on this slide, which shows elements of the farm to maintain its indoor control environment. The chart on the right side shows data taken in a 1-month period inside the farm. This data was taken between October and November. The red lines indicate the relative humidity, while the blue lines indicates the temperature. Seeing these wild swings in temperature and humidity instantly indicate a problem with the farm. On some days, there are as much as 40-degree difference between the high and low temperature in the greenhouse. And this does not create any sort of comfortable work environment. And more importantly, crop production is hampered. Therefore, we intend to solve this by identifying some of the issues that we're now going to look at. Next slide, please. As you peer at the images on the left of the slide, you can observe that the farm is nestled between two residential buildings, which cast long shadows and decrease the direct solar radiation that the farm requires. This is easily observed, so we then perform site analyses and solar studies to better understand how we can improve on the use of this limited captured sunlight for our greenhouse. Upon completion of the solar studies, the table on the right side displays results obtained for the farm as it was modeled in place. And also it was compared to the total amount of sunlight experienced by New York City for the year. Impact Farm received only around 1,950 hours of sunlight, and New York City received close to 5,000. That's 4,397 hours of sunlight New York City experiences. So once we included data from NOAA's website, New York City region does get around 50% clear days. So we normalize these values, and direct solar radiation further decreased. All in all, the impact farm received only 43% of available direct radiation. This is nowhere close to what a greenhouse in the open field receives. So we have a few solutions that I'm going to present on the next slide. So what next? We cannot increase the solar radiation by removing the buildings. That's going to be quite expensive. So we then look at ways of capturing and maximizing the solar gains experience and minimizing heat loss during cold nights or in the winter season. Both Revit models you see in the slide, it shows an axonometric diagram of the impact farm on the left side, sorry, on the right side, and on the left side, you see an exploded, optimized version with thermal screens along the side walls. Again, the side walls are made of polycarbonate, transparent polycarbonate panels, wall assemblies. And the north wall, we use a material with high R value or high resistive value and high thermal inertia, which is structurally insulated panels. Once we include these material to increase wall assemblies, R values, there was a reduction in rate of heat losses. All the ventilations were sealed, and this, as a result, it reduces air infiltration and further reduces heat losses. Next slide. We then ran our model by plugging in the main greenhouse's building assemblies into a software called Passive House Planning Package, or PHPP, where the heat gains and losses results were observed. The optimized results were compared to the controlled greenhouse, and the table on the left is a summary of the graph on the right side. Major losses occurs from the windows and non-useful heat gains. For the window losses, there was around 19% reduction for the optimized greenhouse, and for ventilation, there was a reduction of 71% once the openings and cracks around the windows and doors were sealed. In the gained cells, the heat demand for the control was around 57.6 kBTU per square foot per year. This unit can also be called the energy use intensity, and the optimized farm, it had heating demand of 38.3%, 38.3 kBTU per square foot per year, which posted a reduction of 34% in heating demand from the control greenhouse. This is significant, and hopefully we do apply this to the real greenhouse. The results can translate practically. Next slide. The final solution for the greenhouse, which we do not have any empirical results for, is to improve the heat distribution throughout the greenhouse. Currently, we place a portable pellet stove on the first floor in the center of the green space, where heat is just distributed throughout the greenhouse via convection and radiation. So we intend to implement a modified pellet stove that includes an exhaust combustion air blower and a convection air blower that dispels the hot air throughout the greenhouse via use of a polyethylene collapsible duct system. This duct system goes all the way to the second floor, where it terminates at registers or grills on the floor of the second floor, and this essentially heats up the second floor or the other space that would not have gotten sufficient heat via convection. The stove also radiates heat directly in front of it to the areas on the first floor. That is depicted on the upper left of the right image. That's where we intend to place the modified stove. We do believe that this will be a more effective way to heat up the entire space and minimize air stratification. Marcia is going to take you through the final leg of the project.
Thank you, Michael. So education is the third and last objective of this project. The aim is to reimagine existing educational approach to amplify learning and reception of the farm activities by conducting a workshop for learners wedged between two surveys and measuring the difference in perspective before and after the workshop. So experts believe that investing in urban agriculture-based education can greatly enhance a community's knowledge. Communities will get involved and be more aware of how local food systems work through urban farm programs that aim to educate and inform. As a result, alternative food sources will be created and access to fresh food is made easier. All of it starts with educating groups of younger individuals on food systems. By having a good grasp of the process, one can have more input on how food is grown, harvested, and transported. When an urban community is informed and educated, people become better informed consumers. Educating younger learner inspires the progression of farming and reestablish it as a sustainable urban process. Moreover, it is the key to popularizing urban farming among future leaders, as the inspiration and exposure at an early age will increase the probability of them looking at farming in a new way. Existing educational approach at Impact Farm focuses on elementary and middle school predominantly and include visitations and tours of the farm. Can I have the next slide, please? Right. So for method and focus group, science educators were interviewed and secondary research on effective learning methods were observed and existing urban farming programs were observed. The focus group is elementary and middle school level learners between the age of 8 and 13. For the conservative number of existing programs aimed towards them found from our precedent research. Can I have the next slide, please? Right. And four institutions participated in the project from the state of New York, two from the state of New York, and two from the state of Indiana. 56 pre and post surveys were conducted, totaling 112 surveys from four platforms, as you can see on the table on the left. And the graph on the right shows the learner frequency from each grade. The x-axis shows the school grades, and the y-axis shows the frequency of learners from the associated grades in the graph. Can I have the next slide, please? So the pre-session survey inquires about leafy green consumption among participants. The question aims to gauge the participants' possible direct interest in urban farming through their eating habits. As Harlem Grown's urban farm currently specializes in growing leafy greens like lettuce and cabbage, Insight to learners' green consumption habit can be utilized to find correlation between interest in urban farms and eating habits. Observe both images and compare the diagonally placed pie charts. For example, compare the ones with the four-pointed stars. An interesting set of patterns come to surface from these surveyed questions. There's a similarity between Blue School and Northwood Middle School in both data sets, even though they're in two different cities. The similarity can also be observed between Memorial Park Middle School and Harlem Grove, again, in two different cities. Blue School and Northwood Middle School are located in relatively more financially affluent neighborhoods of their individual cities with smaller index of people of color. Majority of students from both the schools are from upper and upper middle class categories from social economy based on the platform's location. Learners from both these locations show a higher consumption of leafy greens and greater prior gardening experience. Whereas Memorial Park Middle School and Harlem Grove's after-school program are located in relatively more financially stressed neighborhoods of their individual cities with a larger index of people of color. Learners from both these locations show a lower consumption of leafy greens relative to the um, marginal prior gardening experience. Can I have the next slide, please? For the following slides, the blue chart represents the pre-workshop survey results and the green chart represent the post-workshop survey results. As you can see in the little key in the middle, the studies show a considerable change in learners' consideration for growing their own garden once informed and empowered through the educational measures. This confirms that educational measure about urban farm can increase the inclination among students to grow their own greens and vegetables. The percentages you can see is the change in the before and after session surveys. Can I have the next slide, please? This section aims to measure how much a learner may consider growing an urban garden regardless of what is grown. For example, they do not have to grow food that they love consuming, given that they were preferences for exotic food that are hard to grow in their cities, like avocados in New York, while conducting the surveys. The question focused on growing food for consumption, sharing, and potentially selling in an urban environment. This shows how exposure can change inclination towards urban farming effort, making it potentially more popular. By the way, there's a higher change for Blue School from 12% to 16% for, potentially selling food instead of only for consumption. Um, uh, James will take over from the next slide. Thank you.
So each section had its own individual goal that was achieved. For production, we increased the production quantity over 3 times, and the variety from 2 to 8 crop types. In the design, we optimized the material selection and layout for efficiency and sustainability. And for education, we enhanced the curriculum targeting elementary age kids and their awareness of urban farming. However, these goals together serve the holistic goal of creating a community space that facilitates learning about food, farming, and sustainable practices. Everything from each individual growing system to the design principles implemented can be incorporated into lessons and community building activities. The intent is that this project will inspire action and change beyond its direct impact. Thank you for listening, and let us know if you have questions or comments.